When I hear the word sophist or sophistry, the first thing that comes to mind is a politician. Politicians are going to try to give us reasons that support their case, support their cause, support their party, support getting them elected or re-elected. They're not going to give us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They're not going to provide us reasons and facts and considerations that would run contrary to their power, getting re-elected, being popular, etc. Well, sophists in ancient Greece weren't necessarily politicians, although politicians back then, I'm sure, engaged in what we would call sophistry. Sophists were actually a group of people. They were teachers for hire, and these teachers for hire professed to have expertise in a great many subjects. In Plato's Sophist, written about 640 BC, he considers, or the participants in the dialogue, this philosophical conversation or the discussion, they consider what kind or what class of a thing is the sophist. And they, of course, know that the sophist is deceptive, they're manipulative, they profess to have wisdom and expertise in things that they really don't, they're not very trustworthy, and they, at the same time, ask themselves, can a person really have this sweeping expertise in all these subjects that the sophist claims to have? And they conclude that, of course, you can't. You have to specialize. You can't know everything. In fact, most people know very little despite the facade that they put forth, me included. And so in considering how the sophists might reply to their critique, they have to go through this elaborate discussion of whether or not falsehoods are even possible, or whether or not something can be and not be at the same time. And they're having to go through this because they rightly assume that the sophists would go down this road if their expertise were challenged. And if the philosophers didn't prepare beforehand and think about a good answer and a good way to respond to this, they may just be left with no way to pin down the sophist and show that they really don't have the expertise that they claim. This is a good way to illustrate the difference between the philosopher's approach to deep questions and other approaches to deep questions, or a sophistic question, or a sophistic approach to deep questions. Philosophy, of course, I cast as the non-empirical, or the reason-based attempt to answer life's big non-empirical questions. And the philosopher goes about answering these questions with the truth in mind. They don't approach these questions with a predetermined conclusion. They don't approach these questions with some sort of a personal vested interest in mind. They're not going to get rich if one answer is correct or another answer is correct. They're not trying to show that a group of philosophers to which they have allegiance is correct and the other ones are incorrect. A good philosopher approaches any question with the truth in mind. The sophist, on the other hand, approaches questions with a predetermined conclusion in mind. They want to prove that they're correct. They want to show that the other side is incorrect. They're going to selectively present reasons and arguments and considerations that will strengthen their case and weaken the other case, independent of whether or not they genuinely believe that their case is correct. The philosopher will transparently reason through these difficult questions. They will examine the various reasons for and against, and they will collaboratively and cooperatively think through these hard questions with others. The sophists, on the other hand, they're secretive, they're sneaky, they're selective, they're very much biased, they're very much one-sided, whereas the philosopher just wants to provide that objective analysis because their interest is in what's actually the case. You might think of course, modern-day politicians as sophists. You'll see them on television defending their party or defending a candidate or a politician as one of their surrogates. They'll only present reasons that would show that their party or their surrogate or the person they're representing is innocent or is good or is doing a good job. They will dodge questions that would directly, if they were to directly answer, would undermine the credibility of the person they're attempting to defend, or themselves or their party. And so that's an easy example in 2018 of a sophist would just simply be one of these advocates you see on television or the web. The philosopher, on the other hand, you might think of the philosopher as just the citizen who is genuinely interested in which party is best, which candidate is best, which policy is best. There are lots of people out there that just simply want to show that they're correct. And in fact, once people have publicly professed allegiance to a party or to a candidate, it's difficult just psychologically in many cases for them to recant and to say later on that perhaps they were incorrect or take back that endorsement. But for the person who's able to get over that and able to objectively look at questions about policy and politicians, etc. They're just interested in what's actually best, what makes the most sense. And we might think of that person, perhaps of you, as having that philosopher's disposition. You don't represent a particular party, you don't represent a particular candidate, you're not an attorney. Instead, you just want to know what makes the most sense. I invite you to take that same approach as we consider these difficult questions that we'll talk about as junior philosophers, to have that thirst for wisdom and for knowledge and for truth, and to try to come to these questions with an open, objective mind, and be willing to consider arguments from all various directions and to go wherever reason may lead you. Caveat that this is just a very brief inclusion of a very brief portion of Plato's Sophists. There's far much more to this particular dialogue. This isn't intended to be a comprehensive analysis or lecture on it, but instead I'm using the portion about Sophists and how they might try to weasel their way out of a challenge to their expertise to make the broader point and the broader distinction about the philosopher's approach to these difficult questions. Thanks so much for your interest in Socrates and Plato and sophistry and the philosopher's approach, and I hope you enjoyed these creatures in the background here in the beautiful East Tennessee woods.